Hello everyone, this is Patrick with Palm OFCC, where I attempt to do 25 minutes of free code camp every day, hopefully. That hopefully doesn't work out because I did miss a day yesterday. It was just one of those days where motivation, mental energy, physical energy, time, other obligations, just kind of everything got in the way. I wasn't able to do 25 minutes yesterday. Sure, if I had actually had woken up a little bit earlier, I could have done it. But unfortunately, I guess I felt I needed more sleep, which really didn't help me because I was tired all day. But either way, the the way to keep going is perseverance. Even if you miss a day, you just got to keep going. So we're going to do another 25 minutes today. So let's go ahead and start. And we are going to continue on learning how Bezier curves work. Okay, so the last challenge introduced the animation timing function, and a few keywords that change the speed of an animation over its duration. Um, CSS offers another option other than keywords that provides even finer control. It's the use of Bezier curves. In CSS animations, Bezier curves, or Bezier, I think it's Bezier, are used with cubic Bezier function. The shape of the curve represents how the animation plays out. The curve lives on a 1 by 1 coordinate system. X-axis of the coordinate system is the duration of the animation, like time, and the y-axis is the change in the animation. The cubic Bezier function consists of 4 main points that sit on this 1 by 1 grid: the P0, P1, P2, and P3. P0 and P3 are set for you. They are the beginning and end points, which are always located respectively at the origin of 0, 0, and 1, 1. So the end of the duration and the end of the change, the last change, I guess. You can set the XY values for the other 2 points. Where you place them on the grid dictates the shape of the curve for the animation to follow. This is done in CSS by declaring the X and Y values of P1 and P2 anchor points in the form of X1, Y1, X2, Y2. Pulling it all together, here's an example of a Bezier curve in CSS code. So you got 0.25, 0.25, 0.75, 0.75. So it's, I guess it's 0.25 of the duration, and then it's 0.25 of the animation, and then 0.75 the duration, 0.75 the animation. In the above example, the XY values are equivalent for each point. So x1 equals 0.25, okay. Which, if you remember from geometry class, results in a line that extends from the origin point, from the origin, which is 0, 0, to 0.11. This animation is a linear change of an element during the length of the animation, and is the same as using the linear keyword. In other words, it changes at a constant speed. For the element with the ID of ball1, here, change the animation timing function property from linear to its equivalent cubic Bezier function value. Okay, so I'm going to do cubic Bezier, and we're pretty much going to use what we did before. So it's still linear. It's all one constant speed. But if you changed one of these to like 7.5, it might change. See how it slows down? Let's change this one to 25 and see how it works. It almost stops. Okay, so definitely make some more finer changes to the speeds. So that should work. There we go. Let's go to the next challenge. Use a Bezier curve to move a graphic. A previous challenge discussed the ease out keyword. It describes an animation change that speeds up first and slows down at the end of the animation. On the right, the difference between ease out for the blue element and linear for the red. So the red is constant speed all the way down. The blue is fast and then it slows down. Okay. Similar animations progressions to the ease out keyword can be achieved using custom Bezier curve function. In general, changing the P1, P2 anchor points drives the creation of different Bezier curves, which controls how the animation progresses through time. Here's an example of a Bezier curve using values to mimic the ease out style. So that's 0, 0, and then 5, 8, 1. So the second one. So it'll reach its final position at 0.58 time. Okay, remember that all cubic Bezier functions start with P0, 0, 0, P3 at 1, 1. This curve moves faster through the y-axis, starts at 0, goes to P1, which is the value of 0, and then goes to P2, value of 1, P2y value of 1. Then it moves through the x-axis, 0, start 0, up to 5.8 for P2. As a result, the change in animated element progresses faster than the time of the animation for that segment, towards the end of the curve. The relationship between the change of x and y value reverses. The y value moves from 1 to 1, no change, and the x value moves from 0.5 to 1, making the animation change progress slower compared to the animation duration. See, all this is like, when I, it's like so much information that you have to like kind of process at the same time. Like you got numbers, you got a grid, you got the relationship between this point, that point, and that point, and that point. So you got 4 points, you know, that you're looking at in a relationship. Now I can understand for like animators, this might all make you know, a lot more sense. But to somebody like me, it like going from math to a graph, or from a graph to a math to code, it's a little bit harder for me. So I'm just gonna, take its word for it. All right. So it says to see the effect of this Bezier curve in action, change the animation timing of the element with the idea of red, which is linear, and then change it to a cubic Bezier. And then we're going to do 0, no, not 0.0, 0, 0, 0.58, and 1. And you can see it has the same ease out. But in number form, let's make this just a little bit easier to read. But in number form, it's, you know, tough to see that. Like, can you take this cubic Bezier and imagine it in your head? That's how it's going to work. And I am not on that level yet. But this should pass, so let's go. All right, 98%. I think we got one more challenge to complete, and we'll be done with this section of applied visual design. So make motion more natural using a Bezier curve. This challenge animates an element to replicate the movement of a ball being juggled. Okay. Prior challenges covered linear and ease out. Bezier curves, however, neither depicts the juggling movement accurately. You need to customize a Bezier curve for this. The timing function automatically loops at every keyframe when the iteration count is set to infinite. Since there is a keyframe rule set in the middle of the animation at 50%. Where's that at? Right here. Top 10. Okay. Sorry, I'm just reading the code here. Since there's a keyframe rule, it results in 2 identical animation progressions at the upward and downward movement of the ball. This green one's kind of got a weird, it slow, snaps, and it snaps again. So that's interesting. This one's kind of looks like it's bouncing. This one's just kind of moving along on its own little rate. This one eases out every animation, so it's fast and then slow, fast and then slow. This one's slow then fast, slow then fast. Okay. The following cubic Bezier curve simulates a juggling movement, so it's these numbers right here. Notice that the value of y2, which is this, is larger than 1. Although the cubic Bezier curve is mapped on a 1-by-1 coordinate system, it can only accept x values from 0 to 1. The y value can be set for for numbers larger than 1. This results in a bouncing movement that is ideal for simulating a jugular a juggling ball. Change the value of the animation timing function of the element with the ID of green to the cubic Bezier function with these numbers. Alright. So green is like this snap. So we're going to change these numbers here. We're going to do 311, and then we're going to do 441. So it like kind of goes fast, slows down, fast, slows down. And then this one's going to be 0.444. So it's more of a slower movement. And then this is going to be 1. Let's see what does a 1. So it's kind of a fast and then it slows down. If we do it 649, you can see it's kind of going past the other balls. And is more like a juggling movement. Okay. Kind of makes sense. Alright, I don't know how useful that is for everyday stuff, but I guess if you're into animation, CSS animation, this is very useful. Alright, next challenge. Alright, we're in applied accessibility now. So this is about making your web code, your HTML, CSS, all that, be more accessible to those with disabilities. Add text alternative to images for visually impaired accessibility. It's likely that you've seen an alt attribute on an image tag and other challenges. Alt text describes the content of the image and provides a text alternative for it. This helps in cases where the image fails to load or can't be seen by a user. It is also used by search engines to understand what an image contains to include it in search results. Here's an example. So you have an alt attribute here and it says company logo. People with visual impairments rely on screen readers to convert web content to an audio interface. They won't get information if it's only presented visually. And if you've ever listened to a screen reader, it's pretty wild. It goes really fast. But those with visual impairments that are using screen readers, they're used to that speed. But I'm going off on a tangent here. Screen readers usually access the alt attribute to read its content. So like instead of it showing this logo here, it'll read off image, company logo, or something of that sort. Good alt text provides the reader a brief description of the image. You should always include an alt attribute on your image. So all images should have alt attributes. Per HTML5 specification, this is now considered mandatory. CamperCat happens to be both a coding ninja and an actual ninja who is building a website to share his knowledge. The profile picture he wants to use to show his skills should be appreciated by all site visitors. Add an alt attribute. For some reason, this one isn't showing up. I guess this JPEG is. Oh, it's just a big JPEG. It's not like a URL. Add an alt attribute in the image tag that explains CamperCat doing karate. The image src doesn't actually link to an actual file, so you should see the alt text in display. Okay, so we're going to do alt equals CamperCat performing karate. There we go. You can see the alt text show up. And run the test. There we go. For the next challenge, know when alt text should be left blank. In the last challenge, you learned that including an alt attribute when using an image tag is mandatory. However, sometimes images are grouped with a caption already describing them or are used for decoration only. In these cases, alt text may seem redundant or unnecessary. In situations when an image is already captioned or already explained with text content or does not add any meaning to the page, the image still needs an alt attribute, but it can be set to an empty string. Okay, so even if you have like a caption under it, or if like you have a paragraph leading into the image and it says that this is what the picture is showing, you still need an alt text, but you can leave it as an empty string. Background images usually fall under the decorative label as well. However, they are typically applied with CSS rules, therefore not part of the markup screen reader's process. That makes sense. So when you do a background, you can use a CSS rule called background image, but the image is in your CSS. It's not actually in your HTML. So you don't need an alt text for the background image. For images with a caption, you may still want to include an alt text since it helps search engines catalog the image. So, you know, to defer to the mandatory, just always put an alt text in it, and it makes the most sense. It's not going to hurt anything. for anybody viewing the page that's not visually impaired, but it's better to have it than not to have it. Campercat has coded a skeleton page for the blog part of his website. He's planning to add a visual break between his two articles with a decorative image of a samurai. Add an alt attribute to the image tag and set it to an empty string. Note that the image src doesn't link to the actual file. So don't worry that there are no swords showing. Okay. So we're just going to set the alt to an empty string. Because it is considered decorative. It doesn't have anything to do with the page. It's just decorative. Got you. That makes sense. Use headings to show hierarchical relationships of content. Hierarchical relationships content. Headings H1 through H6 elements are workhorse tags. They'll provide structure and labeling to your content. So I always thought about H1s through H6 when you think about like bulleted lists. You remember note taking, having bulleted lists where you kind of tab over book outlines, stuff like that. That's kind of what I think about H1s through H6s. Screen readers can be set to read only the headings on a page so the user gets a summary. So that's pretty cool. This means that it's important for the heading tags in your markup to have semantic meaning and relate to each other, not be merely picked from their size values. Semantic meaning means that the tag you use around content indicates the type of information it contains. If you're writing a paper with an introduction, a body, and conclusion, it wouldn't make much sense to put the conclusion as a subsection of the body. It should be its own section. Similarly, the heading tag in a web page needs to go in order and indicate the hierarchical relationships of your content. Headings with equal or higher rank start new implied sections. Headings with lower rank start subsections of the previous one. As an example, a page with an H2 element followed by several subsections labeled as H4 tags would confuse a screen reader. With 6 choices, it's tempting to use a tag because it looks better, but you can use CSS to edit the relative sizing. So don't use an H4 tag just because you like the size of it. If the previous tag's in H2, use an H3, and then use CSS to change how it looks visually. On one final point, each page should always have one and only one H1 element, which is the main subject of your content. This and the other headings are used in part by search engines to understand the topic of a page. Campercat wants a page on his site dedicated to becoming a ninja. Help him fix the headings so his markup gives semantic meaning to the content and shows the proper parent-child relationships. Change all the H5s to the proper heading level to indicate they are subsections of the H2. Use H3 tags for this purpose. Okay, so here you got H1, how to become a ninja, main, then you got H2, and then these H5s that are under the H2 should be H3s. And though this might not look the way you want it to look, you can always make these smaller in CSS by going in and changing your CSS rules for H3 tags. There we go. So now it's more semantic, I guess you could say. All right. The next challenge, jump straight to content using the main element. HTML5 introduced a few new elements that give developers more options while also incorporating accessibility features. These include main, header, footer, nav, article, and section, and others. By default, a browser renders these elements similarly to the humble div. However, when using them where appropriate gives additional meaning to your markup. The tag name alone indicate the type of information it contains, which adds semantic meaning to that content. Assistive technologies can access this information, provide better page summary or navigation options to the user. So like back in the day, every section was a div. It was just div, 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 and would have IDs of like header and footer and all that. But now they actually give you header, footer, main, section. So the main element used to wrap the main content. There should only be one per page. That means to surround the information that's related to the central topic of your page. It's not meant to include items that represent that repeat across pages, like navigation links or banners. Okay. Main tag is also has an embedded landmark feature that assistive technology can use to quickly navigate to the main content. If you ever seen jump to main content, link at the top of the page, using main tag automatically gives assistive devices that functionality. CamperCap has some big ideas for his ninja weapons page. Help him set up his marker by adding opening and closing main tags between the header and footer. Keep the main tags empty. So it's real simple. We're just going to do a opening main tag and a closing main tag. And there we go. That's all you have to do for this one. Alright, wrap content in an article element. Article is another one of HTML5 new HTML5 elements. Add semantic meaning to your markup. Article is a sectioning element. This is used to wrap independent self-contained content. This tag works well with blog entries, forum posts, or news articles. Determine whether content can stand alone is usually a judgment call, but there are some simple tests you can use. Ask yourself, if you removed all surrounding context, would the content still make sense? Similarly for text, would the content hold up if it were an RSS feed? So, let me gather my thoughts here for a second. So is it asking if the content will work even without like a heading? Like, if you just copy that text, paste it in a notepad, would it make sense for somebody else to read it? That's what I see what they're asking in this little summary. Okay. That's a little bit tougher than like main, header, footer. Like I could see this making sense on a page where you had a whole bunch of different articles, but I guess it says it makes sense on blog entries, forum posts, and news articles. So like, kind of like an aggregate of posts, it makes sense on, but like on a single page where it's just one article, really doesn't make sense to have an article tag in there because it's just one article on there, and that would all be under the main anyways. That's what I'm imagining. The section element is also new to HTML5, has a slightly different semantic meaning than article. Article is for standalone content, and a section is for grouping thematically related content. These can be used within each other as needed. For example, if a book is the article, then each chapter is a section. When there's no relationship between groups of content, then use a div. Div groups, content, section groups, related content, article groups, independent self-contained content. So that's a little heavy, but I think I understand it. CamperCat uses article tags to wrap the posts on his blog page, but he forgot to use them around the top one. Change the div tag to use an article instead. So this one's just going to be article, similar to these two. I can understand article being used for, like, if you got a page like this with a bunch of different articles, but if you clicked on one of these and it took you to that full page, with the full article, there's no reason to have an article link or an article tag in the HTML of that page. I wouldn't imagine. Alright. Make screen reader navigation easier with the header landmark. Next HTML5 element that adds semantic meaning improves accessibility is the header tag. It's used to wrap introductory information or navigation links for its parent tag and works well around content that's repeated at the top on multiple pages. That makes sense. So like this up here would always be the header. Maybe this would be considered header 2 on all pages. Header shares the embedded landmark feature you saw in main, allowing assistive technologies to navigate that content. Note, the header is meant for use in the body tag of your HTML document. This is different than the head element, which contains the page title, meta information, etc. Okay. CamperCat is writing some great articles about ninja training and wants to add a page for them to his site. Change the top div that currently contains H1 to a header tag. Okay. So this will be header. This one will be header. And that should pass. There we go. Alright, make screen reader navigation easier with the nav landmark. The nav element is another HTML5 item with embedded landmark feature for easy screen reader navigation. This tag is meant to wrap around the main navigation links in your page. If there are repeated site links at the bottom of the page, it isn't necessary to mark up those with nav tags as well. Using a footer is sufficient, so this should only be used like main navigation at the top of a page. Okay. Campercat included navigation links at the top of his training page, but wrapped them in a div. Change the div to nav tag to improve accessibility on his page. Alright, so here's the unordered list, and then this is going to be dav, and all this is within the header tag as well. So change that to nav. This is going to be nav. Alright, looks like we are done with our 25 minutes. So let's go ahead and run the test on this one. We complete. And our next challenge tomorrow will be make a screen reader navigation easier with footer landmark. So we're done. As you can see, the timer is up. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully we'll be back tomorrow for another 25 minutes of Free Code Camp. Like I said, I'm going to attempt to do this all the way through the full curriculum of Free Code Camp, which is a lot. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to going through, like, because I do have an interest in data analysis, machine learning maybe as well. I do enjoy JavaScript, stuff like that, you know, like a little bit of brain training, data visualization, something else I might look at. Front end stuff doesn't really interest me that much, like web design, stuff like that doesn't really interest me all that much. Back end stuff kind of interests me. Front end's okay, but I think I'd rather spend time doing, you know, analysis and stuff like that. But we're going to learn it all. So if you happen to watch this, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you tomorrow, hopefully.